Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this rather chilly morning, December 2024, meeting of Otherwise Council's Audit and Governance Committee. Just before we get going, just the usual housekeeping notice that there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. So if you do hear the fire alarm, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route, which is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. Lifts, of course, can't be used in the event of an emergency, and please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. I said to keep the heating on at the moment. It is rather cold in here. So those of you with softer voices, please draw your microphones towards you and speak as loudly as you can into those. Not at the Paul Fuller level, please, though. Yeah. So first of all, apologies. I believe we've had apologies from Councillor Luciani. But otherwise, I believe we're all present. Thank you very much. The meeting is, of course, being recorded. So, but for those who are watching right now or otherwise watching the recording, I'm Andrew Garrett. I'm the councillor who is the chair of this committee. And in the room, we have other councillors who are members of the committee. Councillor Ian Stevens, who is the cabinet member, and members of staff. Who will be informing and advising us as we go along, including by in the room, I mean those online as well. First item of business is to confirm as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on 30th of September 2024. I'll move that. Do I have a second, and do I have any comments about their completeness or accuracy? It is seconded by Councillor Quirk. If there are no comments, then I'll just take a formal vote that we accept those minutes. Thank you very much. And I will now sign them. Issues at the bottom or at the top? Okay, so those minutes are now signed, and we can move to the next item of business, which is declarations of interest. Anyone wish to declare interest? Councillor Jarman.
So specific. I'll try again. All right. Wasn't me. Just to confirm, there are a couple of items which are on here. One is that I'm a member of the working group, which is working on the Constitution as well as the document here. In fact, several of us are. So I'm assuming that we would have a blanket waiver on that point. And the other one relating to some of the accounts that for one of the items on here, I believe it's item 7. I was the cabinet member at the time relating to that financial period.
Just to clarify, that working group working on the Constitution was discontinued. We are now the body that's working on the Constitution. So your interest lies in terms of your committee membership, Councillor Jarman, but thank you anyway. Any other declarations of interest? If they do arise during the meeting, of course, just stop the meeting and at the first opportunity that you can to make those known to us, and they can be recorded. Next item is public question time. Do we have any written questions? We do not. There is no one in the public gallery and no one is indicating online. So I'll move to item 5, which is the reports of our external auditors, Ernst & Young, the completion report for those charged with governance in capital letters. From pages 11 onwards, we have Kevin Sutrams, Jason Jones of Ernst & Young. I will hand over to them to introduce their report to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members. So I'm attending your meeting this morning to present our completion report for the financial year 2022-23, and that starts on page 11 of this morning's papers. So the key headline of our report confirms, as we have previously discussed at this committee, our intention to disclaim the 22-23 audit for the Council. We are disclaiming the accounts as a measure to clear the backlog that has built up over the last few years in local authorities across the country, which we again have discussed in previous meetings. We now have the legislation in place to be able to move forward and start to clear that backlog. And backstop dates have been put in place by central government to clear that by the 13th of December 2024, meaning that all local authorities must have all their accounts published and audits completed for years up to the 22-23 by that date. So inevitably, this means that a large number of audits are going to be disclaimed across the country, where auditors haven't had time to be able to reach an unqualified conclusion. And that's the situation here. So I want to emphasise two things. So firstly, this is not unique to Isle of Wight Council. As I previously said, there are going to be hundreds of delayed local authority audits disclaimed by the first backstop date, and there are going to be a similar number probably by the next backstop date of the 25th of February 2025. And secondly, a disclaimer is not saying there is something wrong with your accounts. Our disclaimer is saying we do not give an opinion because we have not done sufficient work to be able to draw a conclusion and to say there is actually something wrong. So we're not saying there is something wrong with your accounts. Our report in front of you this morning sets out a number of aspects that we are required to report to you either under auditing standards or by the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice, which sets out the scope of our audits. So, for example, they still tell you what the risks would have been for the financial statements audit had we been doing that full audit, and what our view of materiality would have been. But ultimately, we haven't done the audit work to be able to respond to those risks, and so there are no findings, no amendments, no other matters to report to you regarding the financial statements in the way we would normally have done so, because we have not completed that work. We are required to communicate our views on the value for money arrangements of the Council, and that responsibility remains unchanged from previous years, and we have completed that aspect of our work. We presented that information to you back in March of this year, when we presented our interim value for money report for the Council. So there are no changes to the information compared to what has previously been presented to you, and that work on value for money is summarised in section 4 of our report. So as we've already previously presented and discussed that, I wasn't going to go into any detail, but the key message for that part of our work is to confirm that we have no matters to report by exception in regard to your arrangements value for money. We were satisfied that those proper arrangements were in place. Given we did continue to undertake that work, we do need to continue to refer to our independence from the Council, and I'm very happy to confirm that we do remain independent. So the final aspect to refer to you within the content of this report is around the fees, because a number of councils have been asking me what's happening around the audit fees for the year where we're disclaiming the audit. So unfortunately, as we've set out in the report, we still don't have a clear answer on that one. The setting of the fees is the remit of public sector audit appointments, and the regulations that set up PSAA didn't envisage this sort of thing happening, so they are working to devise a solution how to set a fee for the year. So we will have to update you in the future what's happening in regard to that. So very lastly, before I hand over to the members for any questions, Although it isn't within this report in front of you today, I do want to remind and highlight to the members that we have audited the pension fund accounts for 22-23, and we presented the results report for that aspect of our responsibilities back to you in March. As a reminder, there were no critical issues arising from that audit, and the opinion on the pension fund accounts will be unqualified. We've just had to wait until we get into this position with the council accounts and have the legislation in place before we can actually sign those off. But we will be giving an unqualified opinion on the pension fund accounts. So that concludes my presentation this morning on our report, and I'll be happy to take any questions the committee members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Souter. Before I hand over to my colleagues, I will also just highlight the ministerial statement again that said local bodies should not be unfairly judged based on disclaimed or modified opinions. So that's a very important sort of ministerial side to this discussion, because somebody looking in from outside might ask, how have we got ourselves in this position? And if I may open the kind of lines of questioning, so your audits as external auditors is about providing us that final assurance. We will not have that assurance. So where do we seek something that provides to some extent assurance around those matters? I had a very good seminar, which I believe I actually understood last Thursday at the Regional Audit Forum, where they were discussing the impact on prior year comparatives, opening balances, in-year movements, closing balances. Where do we seek that assurance? I'll ask our internal audit as well, but I'll ask you first, Mr. Souter, to sort of comment.
So the primary form of assurance for your account should be from your officers, because the responsibility to provide a set of materially correct set of accounts is that of the Section 151 officers, and his responsibility primarily. We should be just coming in at the end and checking these things and making sure we give appropriate challenge. You also take the assurance from the culmination of the work across a number of areas that come before this committee through the year, I guess we're talking a while back now in terms of the delay, but you have reports from internal audits that would have previously covered 22-23, the internal controls, the financial controls, which should give you assurance in this area. You have reports similar to ones on your agenda this evening, Treasury management, whistleblowing. So if you take all of those aspects together for the year in question, you do have a number of assurances, despite the fact that we are disclaiming the audit.
Thank you, that's helpful. Could I invite our Chief Internal Auditor, and then I'll move to my colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. In actual fact, Kevin has actually covered most of the areas where I would actually flag. There is obviously a risk exposure because they are independent for a reason and they're looking at the accounts in more granular detail. You have multiple layers, which Kevin has already covered, but I think it is reasonable to acknowledge the fact that there is a risk because you are getting less source you would really do.
I raised that in open forum because I think anybody looking in from the outside will ask those questions. We have external audit for a reason. If we don't have if they're being disclaimed, then something is lost from all of that. But also to identify that there are many other places in which assurance is found. But I'll move over now to my colleagues. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Kevin and Jason, thank you very much for your efforts on this. I think we all appreciate it's been a bit of a journey and still a way to go. But because you mentioned it, I should also declare an interest in the pension fund, being the chair of that body. In fact, there are other members here who are also similar members of the committee. I have a question relating to page 22 on the document. You note the significant change in the PFI accounting model that's been applied here. I wonder if you can tell us what that significant change was and what the impact of that change actually is. And it may be that you wish to defer to the internal auditors or indeed to the finance team who are here today for more detail on that.
Councillor Jarman, because we haven't done the audit, I can't. We haven't looked at the issue, we haven't worked it through, and so therefore I don't have an answer for that, I'm afraid. And that is the consequence of us not doing the work and reaching the disclaimer.
Hence why I expected you to defer to either the internal auditors or finance for the answer, but thank you for that.
So, Mr. Downer. Colleagues, I think whilst this is happening, just check that if you are going to be using a microphone, that it is actually completely booted up. Mr. Downer is working now. For his microphone, please.
Yeah, mine's warming up as well.
Is that better? Yeah. There haven't been substantial changes in the actual accounting model for PFI. The only change that comes up in future years is the accounting for the savings over the remainder of the scheme. But the model hasn't changed, it's just the changing the numbers to build in the savings.
So the wording is quite precise. It says there's been a significant change in the PFI accounting model. So I'm intrigued that you say there hasn't been a change in the accounting model.
No, there hasn't been a change in the accounting model. It's the numbers within it that make up the savings that have been built in.
So that statement is wrong then. It should have a word "not" in it. There's not been a change in the PFI accounting model.
No, there hasn't been a change, no.
Okay.
We're working with the auditors over the next couple of months to go through the PFI in detail ahead of next year's audit.
So I wasn't aware that there had been, which is why I raised it. So I'm glad that you've clarified that there's not been a change in the accounting model, in which case that section on page 22 needs to be corrected.
It seems so. Mr. Suter, this is your report, so do you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, that's a fundamental issue that we haven't done the work, so we haven't been able to identify what the changes were or not. So we used words around our understanding at the time. So I'm quite happy to put a significant change in PFI accounting or something similar. But fundamentally, the issue is we haven't addressed those. We haven't addressed it. We haven't looked at it, so we can't give you any assurance on that basis and whether the officer's statement is correct. Although I have no reason to believe it isn't.
Mr. Jarman, are you satisfied with that response? Or?
I suspect, Chair, we have to be somewhat pragmatic at this stage in that the normal process would be to go through and comment and really examine the report. But given what Kevin has said, that he cannot vouch effectively for any of the information which he's been given because they've not examined it. Equally, we cannot examine that information because we don't have it and we don't have anything from Kevin that we could query. So we're also stymied in our analysis.
Thank you. Councillor Quirk.
3 questions, but they're all interrelated. The first is, this is a problem across the country with councils. So it's an area where a bit of benchmarking might actually be appropriate. We're told there are a lot of councils in this position. Do we have an idea as to how many are actually still in this position who won't be meeting the new deadline? The second is, do we have an idea of when the accounts will be audited and presented to us? And is there a new target date for that? And the third question is, what is the impact on the council, other than not having the confidence of the external audit? Are there any consequences to the council that follow on from not missing that deadline?
Peter, hopefully you picked up those questions. Are you able to respond?
In some ways, yes, I can give an answer. So the numbers, yeah, there will be a lot of disclaimed audits. How many, I genuinely don't know. We'll probably only find out after Friday of this week, when the backstop date has passed, and the information will be collected either by NHCLG or PSAA in terms of our contractual reporting responsibilities to them. So I guess, probably in a week or so's time, or very early after Christmas, we will know how many audits have been in this position, but there will be a lot. So when the accounts will be audited, to be absolutely clear, the accounts for 22-23 will not be audited. This is it. Our disclaimer discharges our responsibilities for those accounts. What we will be doing is rebuilding assurances in the future. So once we move past the backstop date for the next financial year, 23-24, and we start getting into the 24-25 audit, our work programs will be updated to rebuild the assurances. So you move from a position where you have disclaimers through to, well, hopefully through to unqualified positions over time. That's not going to be a quick piece of work. The FRC have worked with the NAO to publish guidance, and they've set out within their guidance that this will take a good couple of years to move back to that sort of normal unqualified position. But that's the aim and the intent that we will start working from our 24-25 audits. So regarding the impact upon the council, the consequences, well, we do hope there won't be any, and we don't envisage there are to be any. What the FRC and the NAO have tried to do is engage other stakeholders so they understand this. And they've also got plans to have communication strategies in place. So if there are any questions from a stakeholder in the future, then you could perhaps point them in that direction for an explanation of what's been going on and why this isn't particularly specific to the Isle of Wight Council, as I previously said, and explains the underlying position in terms of how the backlog has arisen. So at the moment, I don't envisage consequences, but I guess it's one of those things that we will see over the next year or so as time moves on.
Councillor Quirk, do you want to follow up on that? Councillor John? I think you indicated again. Yeah.
Are there any sorry, Kevin, I feel like I have my back to you, but you're on the screen, so you can probably see me from every direction there is anyway. Are there any implications here for the going concern undertaking?
No, there aren't. So you would be expected to make sure you're a going concern anyway. It's just part of the normal responsibilities to approve a set of accounts. That primary responsibility for that, as I sort of talked about earlier, remains with your Section 151 officer. The CITFA code sets out that there is a presumption of going concern, and none of that changes. The difference year on year is the fact that we haven't got an opinion that comments upon it, and that's the only difference. But the underlying position of the council is the same as it has previously been.
Colleagues, any other questions or comments on this? Obviously, it is a situation that none of us would want to have arisen. So the webinar I attended last week was very full in terms of explaining the implications for local authorities. But I think one of the questions is what is the sector itself? What's the audit sector, your sector, Mr. Souter, doing to be part of the solution to restoring situations where there will be assurances across all councils, including this one?
So we're doing a number of aspects, but first of all, I think I need to set out this needs to be a system solution, because not all the factors are able to be controlled by the audit firms. So, for example, to be able to get an audit done upon time needs a local authority to produce its accounts on time and properly support its audit. And there are a number of authorities across the country that haven't been in that position for a while and will need to take appropriate action to build their capacity and their finance teams to make sure they can produce good quality accounts. When we finally get the numbers around these backstops and disclaimers, you'll see that some authorities will have a number of years disclaimed because they, that which illustrates they haven't been in that position. We also need to take, I think, a good look at the CIFA Code of Accounting. Local authority accounts are very complex and very lengthy, especially if you compare them to private sector businesses. So there is a good argument for taking a good look at the content of those accounts to make them simpler. Therefore, that would help local authorities prepare them and also help auditors audit them. And there needs to be a workforce strategy across audit and local authorities to make sure we have the right people on both sides to be able to prepare and look at sets of accounts. So we're trying to get in place, sufficient resources through our training programs. But again, local authorities and people like CIFA need to have a strategy in place so we've got sufficient people to prepare and make sure the accounts are correct. So we're trying to do what we can within our new PSAA contract. We think we've got the right number of bodies that we can deliver sustainably over time, but this has to be a system solution because not all the items are controllable by the auditors.
Thank you for that. And I think that was the message from the webinar I attended, that but certainly the sector has obviously a role to play in that. Councillor Critchison, you have a question.
No, I've never seen anything like that. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I don't fully understand all the audit ins and outs. So, and that was one of the questions I was going to bring up later, was about training, really. I felt that this agenda was quite full of information and that some of it I could do with more in-depth guidance on. But I just wanted to be sure. So do we have to have legally the audit, the accounts audited every year? Is that... And obviously it isn't going to be this year. And I just wondered, some companies you don't have to. I didn't know if it was different for councils. And so we've paid for this service, but we haven't fully got audited accounts. And I just wanted, those bits clarified, really. Thank you.
Yes, you are required to have an audit of some form every year. And unfortunately, while we have been able to do some of your audit, as I talked about earlier, the value for money responsibilities, we haven't been in a position to audit your accounts. So we still have to give an opinion, and that's going to be our disclaimed opinion. And that links upon to your second point about the fees. So as I talked about earlier in my presentation, setting the fee is the responsibility of public sector audit appointments, the PSAA, and they are working on a solution to try and work that through and set an appropriate fee for the year in question, given the fact we haven't been able to undertake a full audit.
It's a very important question, that last one, Councillor Critchison. I know it was discussed in some depth, I believe, at a council over the water in the last week or two. When one pays money for a service, one expects the full service, and so there is that question as to what one should pay, given whose responsibility it is for the service not being quite delivered. But as Mr. Souter has outlined, we work through the PSAA for public sector something. But I'm sure at some point we will be informed. Before we move on from this, I just wonder, I would invite, but I might expect either Mr. Souter or our Chief Internal Auditor to decline to, but is there any advice they would give to us, given the situation we are in and given what will also happen in February, where a second round of accounts will be disclaimed? And we, as those responsible for governance, as the capital letters title does have on our agenda, that we should be particularly mindful of it, given these circumstances. I'll ask Ms. Goodwin to respond.
One of the things to be mindful, and I think Sorry. One of the things to be mindful, and I think Kevin's probably picked up on it, in that obviously they've got a couple of years where they're going to be doing their disclaimer, but actually that also makes it difficult for them when they do commence the audit for the year in question, because of course they wouldn't have verified all of the relevant areas kind of beforehand. You've had good visibility on various sources of assurance. I think moving forward, obviously, you need to maintain that level. I've had agreed with Chief Executive that actually, perhaps because you've got 2 years, what might be helpful for you is if the internal audit section pulled together all of your assurances that you would have had over the period that is not going to be audited. That should at least remind us all of where we had risk exposure, whether there was any concerns and how those concerns were addressed. You haven't had qualified accounts I don't think you've had qualified accounts full stop, where there is a level of assurance that actually you can get from that as well. So I think it's maintaining the level of scrutiny to which you already have. And I think we can do the retrospective exercise, which again will put it into perspective regarding what we've already gone through, because obviously external audit is a retrospective look of the accounts. It's detailed, it's not going to replace that, but it will give potentially an extra layer of comfort, but you need to keep everything else as well on the table.
Thank you for that. I think that's really important. I have in mind not only that this committee does have at least one more meeting before the end of the financial year, but also next year is the local elections, and therefore the Audit and Governance Committee could be very differently constituted in terms of its membership, including who may be chair of that committee. So there's part of the institutional memory, so to speak, that I'm keen for us to have in mind. It is one thing I've thought for my chair's annual report in March, that we might bring together collectively as a committee the thoughts we would be passing on to the next committee, assuming none of us were present on that committee. I'm sure some of us will be re-elected, and some of us may or may not be chairs of committees along the way, but we do need to keep that institutional understanding going, because this is a highly unusual position. I note there's a management representation letter which has my name under available space for signature at some point. Is there anything we need to take as a committee right now on this item? There is, I think, on the further item, but otherwise we are noting what Ernst & Young have provided to us today. I'm assured that there isn't any formal resolution we need to make at this stage. So obviously we have to note what's come before us. Colleagues, shall I move us on? And Councillor Richardson, I agree with you that the training issue is a really important one. And again, given that there will be a new council from May next year, which there'll be a number of new members, finding ways of getting some really good training. I know that the one I had at this webinar I've referred to 2 or 3 times was extremely good in being able to set out clearly what this issue particularly was doing. So we will need to look at that. And obviously training is part of the discussion around the whole future governance issue as well. But okay. Item 6 is reports of the Chief Internal Auditor. Would it be sensible to move to item 7 first and then take into account and then come back to your reports at 6? So Mr. Downer, I think this is you, is it not?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This one naturally follows on from the last one. So this report is primarily about the 22-23 accounts, which we've just discussed in relation to the audit, but it also touches upon the 23-24 position. So as you know, the production of the accounts is a complex piece of work involving a robust planning process and involves senior officers and departments right across the council. We published the draft accounts in August 23. We've now been through that audit process, although limited this year. And the Appendix 1 is the final 22-23 accounts ready for your approval. Deadlines we mentioned in the earlier slot. So this Friday, the 13th, is the final government deadline for publishing those accounts, which we will, following this meeting, we will be, if approved, be able to upload them to the website. The second part of the report touches upon 23-24. So those accounts were published in draft in September, followed by a period of public rights, which we have every year. That ran to the 7th of November, and positively there were no proposed objections from that process. The audit of the 23-24 accounts is expected to follow a similar process to the one that we've just discussed. The backstop arrangements for that include a date to be signed off by the end of February 2025. Crucially, that's ahead of the next Audit and Governance Committee. So this report seeks to put in arrangements to deal with that, signing off the accounts. Going forward, obviously, we'll work with the external auditors to continue to support the period of recovery over the next few years.
Thank you for that. It's a lengthy pack, the accounts. They do bear some reading. I'm sure Councillor Jarman has forensically, because he's very good at these. I did do my best to go through all of them. Particularly interesting to just see the way in which it's described in what you have to do and how you present all of these things. And there are little side sorts of things which are actually quite interesting, such as the discussion of our dinosaur collection. I think I've mentioned this before, but it is there, and how it is or is not valued, and some of the other kind of collections. But obviously those are minor things, but they are in there, and I would say that anybody who has time to at least skim through would get quite an understanding of the complexity of what has to be done. And our thanks go to the team, albeit the difficult circumstances, who do this work, but also give an insight into just the sheer breadth of things that this council is responsible for. Colleagues, any questions upon Mr. Downer's report? Councillor Quirk.
Page 74, the Wootton Primary School audit was suspended due to lack of capacity in the school. That sounds very worrying. That
I think
they can't be.
Yeah, I think that was the previous report, was it not? Page 74. I've skipped to item 7, so we're on 7.
Oh,
Councillor Quirk.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
I've got ahead.
Yeah. I will be coming back to 6, which is behind 7. We changed the order of numbers. Anything on the statement of accounts, though? Councillor Jarman, please.
Just for the avoidance of doubt, as per Councillor Quirk, I also have questions on section 6A, but on section 7, a few things to query. I noticed that some of the carry forward numbers are not the same, and I wondered, I'll give you an example. If we go to page 116, and you'll see the total carry forward at the bottom of the page from the 31st of March 22 is 125,084,000. And then you go at the amount that arrived, brought forward on page 117. We seem to have lost 20 some thousands from the account. And I wondered why, because the amount carried forward is not 125,084, it's 125,082. I'll just pull that as one example. But I wondered why it is that. Is there some accounting issue why a figure carry forward is not the same as a carry forward arrival in the next year? I couldn't think of one. It also doesn't, there's no possible mathematical calculation I could come up with which would account for rounding, which would create a 2,000 difference.
In terms of the tables on pages 116 and 117, the balance brought forward and the carry forward are the same number, 125082.
So the figure on 116 is wrong, is it? Just using this as an example. I'll give you my papers afterwards. You can take them away and see all the pinky.
Yeah, I'll be happy to comment on any little differences. There will always be a small element of rounding within the figures. Small element.
It would appear to be just on the basis of the two figures above. They don't add to that figure, but they do add to the two figure, don't they? So I think that's something to be corrected.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Does that have any bearing on what may or may not be agreed to this morning, though? Yes, yeah. The chief executives remind me that we do need to agree this today in order to publish. But in terms of what I would seem to be a typographical slip or a slip of some sort, but does the need to correct that have a bearing on what can be agreed? Is what I'm saying. We know there to be an error. Do we need to be sure that that error has been corrected? Do carry on, Councillor Jarman. I'm sure Mr. Downer is considering what you said.
Page 149, table 11. I'm assuming the little mark on there is an indication, was supposed to be an indices pointing to some reference, but there was no reference. And I'm assuming that these are related to the transfer of the firefighters' pension allocation or to some of the reserves which were held where we had to transfer in some way. Councillor Stevens will remember this because I remember he was involved at the time and we weren't very happy about it. We had to transfer some part of our reserves at the same time to the pension, to the fire body. Is that correct? And if so, could we actually have the figures that were transferred or should have been transferred or an index to where that information is held?
The transfer of fire happened in the 21-22 position. So there's zero values in the 22-23 accounts table.
Those should just be zeros instead of what I can't actually work out what squiggle it is, but some small till.
They're a dash because there's no relevant numbers for the current year.
It should just be a zero then. Is that correct? Yeah.
They are zeros, yes.
Okay. Right. Thank you. I'll take you to the next thing I've highlighted is on 146. And this relates to the dedicated schools grant in your deficit. You might recall at one of our former meetings where, although they've gone now, we had the external auditors here. We asked whether in the accounts we were required to accrue for an anticipated take on of debt from school closures? And I think the answer we got was an unqualified yes, full stop. And yet I could not see where that qualification was in these accounts or where we were accruing for that expected take on. Perhaps you could point where that is in the accounts now, given the external auditors were very clear that it had to be there.
I won't speak for the internal auditors, but at that meeting, it was that we should consider whether there was any liability at the end of the year. And at the end of the 22-23 financial year, there were no liabilities for school debt.
I beg to differ, because I think the question was put by me and it was very clear to the external auditors.
Mr. Souter is still present and has his hand up, so maybe he can help us on that.
Yeah, so my recollection of the issue is that we said we would look at it and we would consider it. We would not have given a definitive point whether an item would be needed in the accounts or would it not be needed in advance of completing the audit. So if Mr. Downer has suggested that this has been looked at and the requirement has been met, then that's the accounting judgment for the officers. But we would not have given a categorical assurance whether it should be in or out without completing the audit of the numbers.
I won't go back to the recording, but I'm very sure of what I've just said. But if the decision is that we are not including it, even though there was an anticipated take on of debt that would have accrued, that's the judgment of finance at the moment, is it? Not to accrue for it.
Not in relation to the year 22-23.
Again, even though that was actually in a paper presented to members at the time.
In the production of these accounts, there's a section where we have to review contingent liabilities.
Yes.
And in reviewing those, the potential liability has to be quantifiable and in existence at that point in time. The decision on the future of the schools and those in deficit at that time haven't been taken.
Okay, I won't push the point unduly, but I had expected that, given a paper was presented to members at the time which talked about what our contingent liability would be and identified details of the schools that would be appropriate for that. We know now, of course, that continuing figure has continued to be manifest, and we're aware of what the current proposal is. I think that's been discussed in other meetings this week. But the fact that I see no record of that being accrued yet in the accounts seems quite unusual. Any business which knows it has a contingent liability that it's facing would normally be expected to accrue those in accounts at some stage, and indeed at the earliest opportunity. I've not known any business try to dissuade that course of action.
The status of the decision will be taken into account at each year end when we produce the accounts. For this year, for this 22-23 year, it hadn't been quantified in enough detail to be able to confirm it.
Accept what you're saying. Thank you. So a similar issue comes up on page 171 in relation to that same topic, which shows in your budget deficits, but doesn't actually accrue the figures in the accounts. And then on the cash flow statement, I had a question about the detail that lies behind the figure in page 29, which is, do we have anywhere in here a breakdown of the 45 million pounds of interest paid? Not an insignificant sum to be simply given as a total.
they're just digesting what you've asked there.
Apologies, I missed the page number for the cash flow that you were looking at.
171.
There's not a detailed breakdown within the accounts, but it would be primarily related to Treasury related and PFI items.
So I wonder if it would be possible then to circulate after the meeting a breakdown of the 45. Obviously, knowing what of it is under the PFI agreement would be a wholly distinct matter in many ways to the other operational characteristics of the council itself. And such a big figure, 45 million, does, I believe, require some level of definition within it. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I can provide a breakdown.
So the next question I had was on page 174. And this was note 6 in the accounts, which relates to the payments for our 151 officer. And I wonder if you could tell me what the 60,000 actually includes or doesn't it include. I'm not too sure whether that is simply a contract payment that we do to Portsmouth as a lump sum, or whether we have expenses or national insurance or other pension such liabilities included in those calculations.
That's the council's contribution to the full costs of that post. So obviously the post holder is employed by Portsmouth City Council and they will incur employers' national insurance and employers' pension and contributions. The 60,000 is our contribution representing the amount of time that the contract arrangement is for within the contract basically.
So
It's
it is
a
the total
contract payment.
So that's the total payment we make in regard to the 151. We don't pay expenses or anything on top of that.
We do, that expenses are within that figure, so we estimate a sum for expenses each year. I mean, the expenses are very small. That is predominantly the salary related share of our costs.
Okay. So the next one we have is on page 181. And this does follow on from my earlier declaration about the pension fund. And the cross-charging which is going on here from the council to the pension fund is now risen to £0.539 million charged against the pension fund. And of course, the pension fund isn't ours. It's also not the council's. It's held by the members of the pension fund as trustees for the beneficiaries of the pension fund. Sorry to be rather picky about that, but the role is important. And that is a very large number to be taking away from that fund every year. And you will be aware that the pension fund committee has raised queries on that for quite some time to get breakdowns of those figures and indeed querying why it is that the council is charging the pension fund for fulfilling what is a council statutory obligation. I'm just reflecting on that figure and would welcome a response to that point. Again, it's not an insignificant amount of money to be taken from the pension fund.
The pension fund does consume costs in administering that pension fund, which do have to be recharged as part of the surplus arrangements, that every support service is recharged out across the more direct services of the council in relation to the amount of those services they consume. So it includes things like HR, payroll, any creditor payments, ICT is a particular, usually quite large cost. Just all the overheads of the council. They are spread out across all of the service areas, as I've just said, based on cost drivers that actually represent how much of those support services are being consumed by each area. It's something which we periodically review, particularly when we have any significant organisational changes. There is plan in progress for a review actually coming up early in the new year. So all of those charges will be looked at again. If there are any changes which need to be made, they will obviously be made, and the apportionments will be potentially different across different service areas, depending on those changes which we find when we look at that data and recharge accordingly. But they are appropriate recharges. We do our best to make sure they're as accurate as possible and reflect exactly where those services are being consumed.
And I think it's going to be very important that Pension Fund Committee it continues to explore that in terms of a statement of accounts. The figure, though, is correctly stated, isn't it? And that's going to be a really important thing for the accounts side of things. But certainly Councillor Jarman's right to raise that. But I'm sure under his chairmanship, he will continue to pursue that under the remit of the committee that he chairs. So, but otherwise, we can be confident that that is the correct figure. Whether or not that is the right figure in terms of charge is perhaps for another place at the moment. Councillor Jarman, I'm sure you have more.
So next question relates on page 81 to the 5th paragraph from the bottom. And this is the limited liability partnership we have with Public Sector PLC Financing Facilitating Limited. Are separate accounts for that body actually produced? And where would we be able to access them?
Can you say that page number again, please?
Yeah, 181. The broader question is relating to joint ventures, financial ventures, which this council has with other bodies, and how the accounting details are shared with members for those joint ventures.
So the status of any potential joint ventures or bodies that we're involved in is reviewed at each year end, so that the status of them is considered at that point. If there are any account requirements or any submissions to Companies House, those are coordinated by the council.
The question is, where this council has joint ventures, how are the accounts for those joint ventures shared with members? They're not, for example, attached to the back of the main body of the accounts to show, here's the main body of our accounts, and we have these 5 or 6 or 7 joint ventures, and here's the subsidiary accounts for those, and how those are rolled up into the main body. So do we share with members the accounts for joint ventures where there is a council financial investment? And if not, would it not be a good idea to do so?
That level of detail isn't required for the formal statement of accounts.
I don't want to delay the committee unduly, so I'll ask one more and stop at that point, because I'm going to give you my pack afterwards. You can see all the issues that I've raised. I'd like to turn to the last paragraph on page 181, which relates to Perpetus, the Tidal Energy Centre, where we have an investment as well, and inquire what qualification is being given to that investment in the accounts, and are we still maintaining that without writing any figure off relating to that venture?
So that's held in the accounts as a loan that is showing as outstanding, currently profiled at the end of the agreement, which is a couple of years' time.
Yeah, so the question was, are we making any allowance for any writing off of that figure, or do we still hold it at this time to be a viable debt?
We still hold it in full at this time.
I'll stop now, Chair, because I can sense there's an air here, which I don't want to become uncomfortable for anyone, including yourself.
No need to apologise. It is important to ask questions as you see them. But what it strikes me is that perhaps for a future situation, we find a way that that we ensure that these questions, it is important to raise questions in public forum. And I've always said that I may ask a question in private and then re-ask it in public because it places it on public record. But we may need to find a way to make sure that questions like this can be looked at head of committee. So as you suggest, Councillor Jarman, aren't held up so much, but that we actually delve into properly. Colleagues, are there any other questions? Councillor Jarman.
Just one more. I did actually write to Finance on the 18th September, the 16th of October, the 25th of October, requesting meetings with Finance. I raised the issue again last week with the Chief Executive. I received no reply to any of those emails.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm sure the Chief Executive will look into those matters. But notwithstanding that, for the next time, the learning point in terms of the line of questioning here is to make sure that we can do so such that officers can fully respond to the questions. They're important questions. Any other questions from other colleagues? Councillor Critchison.
Thank you, Chair. The same, I had highlighted the PTEC investment and noted that there was the 5-year extension to that loan and guessed that it was still as an outstanding loan and it will be dealt with when that extension date is up, and we will find out then whether that is the future of that loan at that point. I did also highlight the funding for Bluebells Meadows on there, that it's still outstanding, and was querying that we keep holding that over, and is there any movement on that as when we will get the homes that are the payment? It says here that we will get homes in exchange rather than the payment, so any more information on that would be useful. Thank you.
In relation to the Bluebells item, I don't think there's been any resolution of that, in particular for this year of the accounts.
So want to pursue there, Councillor Critchison.
I was going to say, I'll bring that up at a different committee. Thank you.
And I think that's an important point. There will be other places in which certain lines of inquiry can be further pursued, where their terms of reference perhaps are more aligned to this, but that doesn't mean I always think there's no wrong door to ask a question. So yeah. Oh, you have another question?
No, I just want to make a comment on that this is a useful forum to find information to use for other committees. So thank you.
Indeed. Anything else on this? There is an important resolution to make under the recommendations otherwise. Are we in any way constrained by the fact that there is a correction to be made to the figures? Can we take our so the Chief Executive advised me, as I thought would be, that we take these recommendations at page 101, items 5 and 6. I'll read them out because they are very important. That the 2022-23 statement of accounts be approved, subject to the corrections required, and the person presiding be authorised to sign and date the 2022-23 statement of accounts. That's the first one. And the second, that the chair of the committee in section 151 officer be given delegated authority to make any final changes as necessary following the conclusion of the 2023-24 audit to then sign and date the 2023-24 statement of accounts as final. That's to overcome the fact that a requirement is needed before our next meeting. Can I just check that it is in order for the chair of committee to have a delegated authority in this regard? Because that chair, yeah, I just wanted to check. That's going to be very important for next year's committee system, where chairs of committees won't necessarily have delegated authorities. But those are the recommendations, with that caveat about amendment, colleagues, that I shall move that from the chair. Councillor Jarman.
Before it gets seconded, it won't surprise you that I'm very uncomfortable with that. I think we have a number of unresolved issues here. I'm not at all happy that we're not accruing for the school debt. I believe the tidal energy one, the planning application has been refused. I cannot see that maintaining a value associated with that without some consideration is appropriate. You know, I've raised a number of issues and I'm going to hand the papers over so that the finance team can look at them. I think for us to simply move forward and approve them, subject to all those issues being resolved or errors being corrected, I have very serious reservations about that.
I look to, Councillor Churchman first.
Yes. Sorry. I sat on planning committee when we refused any more a planning application on the tidal energy, and it really does concern me just how far we've gone. Have we lost money, etc.? Thank you, Chair.
When can somebody remind me when that planning committee? That was 2 months ago. Can somebody explain to me, given that these are the 2022-23 accounts, are they allowed to have a kind of forward, the ability to predict? Because at the time of the accounts, there wasn't a planning committee resolution. I would think it'd be odd to kind of require something, but I don't know. This is what I'm looking for: professional advice that it is that accounts can take account of things that happened after the date at which they were considered to have been finished with.
Yeah, I would just like to remind the members that this is the 22-23 accounts. 23-24 accounts have also been published in draft and are subject to a potential further audit work. The situation, as just pointed out, is recent in terms of the planning issue. That will be taken into account in the most recent set of accounts which we will be compiling, and we will consider then whether we need to actually take any action. But as Mr. Down has pointed out, the loan extension period does actually extend beyond those accounts. So it will be, we may well think about whether we need to make a provision in the later set of accounts, but it wouldn't have applied to the accounts that are in front of you today for decision.
And I would be deeply uncomfortable, to use Councillor John's phrase, if we tried to take account of things that we couldn't have taken account of because we don't have those extrasensory powers to look forward into the future, if we consider the point in time at which we are considering ourselves to be at. So, but Councillor John.
I'm sure many of us here have been in business as well, and it is not at all unusual that we are. We're not approving the accounts at that date. We are asked to approve them today, and so it is not at all unusual in a business sense that if a matter arises after the accounts are prepared, but before they are approved, if something material happens and you're made aware of that, you can't simply ignore it. You know, if I'm sure if somebody is running a bakery on the island and they write their accounts for a year, and then before they get approved, they suddenly realize they've forgotten an invoice for £1 million. You know, there would be an expectation that a caveat would be written in on each of the points, material points which had arisen after that date, at the time of being asked to approve them. So it is now at this moment we are being asked to approve them, and with the knowledge that we now have, whether that was eminent at the end of the financial year or not, I suspect is probably not wholly material, because it is not unusual for material facts to come to light after the end of an accounting period. So again, severe concerns.
And somebody help both myself and Councillor Jarman as to
So there's a section in the accounts about events that happen after the balance sheet date. There's two categorizations. There are where there are conditions that existed at the end of the reporting period, these would be adjusting events. Where they relate to events occurring after the reporting period, such as future decisions or future committees, these are non-adjusting events.
is that helpful to you, Councillor Jarman? Councillor Critchison, you have a question.
No, that's a good question on that. I'm thinking, having all the knowledge that you say, but I don't think we do have all the knowledge in that circumstance, that perhaps the loan agreement and the planning commission are quite separate issues, and one doesn't necessarily mean that they will not repay the loan or the details of it. So I figure in this instance, it's not necessarily a mistake or a concern, because it is a separate issue in my mind. But maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
And could an officer explain to me the consequence of not taking a decision today?
I think it's potentially reputational that we won't have published the accounts by the required deadline.
Thank you. It's always very important to understand the consequences of not doing something as much as of doing something. Councillor Critchison, in the meantime, has indicated that she will second the move that I have made. So it is still there before us, colleagues. Do we wish to discuss it any more, or shall I move to a vote on this? Councillor Redrup, just sneaked in before you, Councillor Jarman.
Be clear, if we postpone it until our next meeting to allow Councillor Jarman's points to be looked at and then come back at our next planned meeting, would that be totally detrimental? Just my thoughts before we vote.
This is a concern I've had where we've got a cut-off date, haven't we?
Sorry, I don't think there will be any adjustments, any fundamental significant adjustments to the accounts as a result of the issues that have been raised today. We will give Councillor Jarman the detail behind the numbers, but we are confident that the numbers are actually correct and that there is no reason to withhold the publishing of the statements. I don't think there'll be any adjustment, sorry if you see what I mean, that will be required as a result of any of the issues.
So I think what you're saying, that trying to delay they wouldn't lead to any material change in the figures, other than the one correction that we have identified.
Yeah, the correction for the £2,000,
yeah,
which with respect we will make, but it's clearly not material and it doesn't impact on the actual content of the accounts and the overall picture of the accounts.
Thank you. Councillor Red.
What is the impact by holding it over until the next meeting? I understand why you want to finalise and get on with next year's set of accounts, as it were. But Councillor Jarman has raised a few points that makes me curious now. But if there's a good reason that we need to do this today, I would like to know what that reason is that we finalise these accounts. Is it monetary or is it just?
The government backstop of this Friday's attracted a lot of attention nationally and through regional groups. So in not meeting that deadline, I think there's quite a reputational impact of the council. And secondly, the next meeting of this group isn't until March. So as well as this 22-23 financial year, 23-24 also needs to be resolved before then. So there'll be two government backstop dates that would have been breached.
Yes, of course.
So you can assure us then that the points that have been raised today are small and not too significant that we should be concerned, greatly concerned.
Yes, the issues regarding PTEC and the DSG deficit will not result in any adjustments to the accounts. The other things mentioned detail can be provided. We are happy that the figures are correct. I don't think there's any fundamental reason why you shouldn't be able to sign the accounts today.
Is there an indication, councillor Quirk? Yeah.
My suspicion, very strong suspicion, is that the accounts are largely correct and accurate, but there are quite clearly some issues that have been raised. I'd just like to understand exactly what the wording of the resolution is, because it was a little bit vague, and what is going to actually be done to put things right. I think we need to have a much clearer resolution in order to approve it. It would be good to approve it today, but I think we have to have a resolution that actually defines what action will be taken to address the inconsistencies.
And you remind what I said, otherwise I can kind of rehearse it from what is here and what I believe I said earlier, which is, excuse me, that the 2022-23 statement of accounts be approved subject to the required amendment. Now we could add in at page such and such of the figure so and so to so and so, so a 4 becomes a 2. I can't remember the exact page number, but we will find that. Sorry.
Page 116, I believe.
116. So we could word it that way, and that and then what would then continue, and the person presiding be authorised to sign and date the 2022-23 statement of accounts. So there was that, and then the second wording is as printed in the papers. Councillor Jarman.
Again, I think the danger of that is that that we would be being presumptive that that was the only one of the marked up concerns that I've got here, which would actually be accepted. It may well be that other items that I've marked up would raise concerns and need to be addressed. I'm not at all sure with that. I think we're left with a choice of delaying something, and the only downside seems to be some concern about reputational damage. I would rather that we sign off accounts that we believe to be accurate, and this tidal energy thing bothers me quite a lot. So I think the issue still remains that there are concerns, and we have a choice, to your point, Chair, which is to approve something with some caveats that will be sorted out later, or to delay with a worry about reputational damage so that we can sign off accounts that we have confidence in the future. And I would remind everyone of the remark I made at the beginning, that I've written to Finance on 3 occasions seeking meetings with them where these and other matters would have been raised, and I received no reply to those emails during what is now a 2-month period. So I cannot hold myself at fault for not being able to raise these issues otherwise. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to comment in that regard, either a member or an officer? Councillor Churchman.
I would just support Councillor Jarman. After all, this isn't our money. I've said it many times. 142,000 people on the Isle of Wight, 120 of which, I think I'm correct, pay council tax. Thank you, Chair.
Well, what I would rest upon is what Ms. Aberdare has just said, that there would be no change in, other than the change that we have identified, that it is her professional opinion. There would be no alteration given what has been discussed this morning. I understand completely what Councillor Jarman is saying, but a number of those questions seem to be lines of inquiry relating to not the statement of the figures, but about items of delivery of service and policy or whatever. Now, I'm sure he has greater expertise than me in these things, but I do, as somebody who served in public relations for a very long period of time, do take the issue of reputational damage very seriously. If we were to be highlighted as a council that had failed to do this on the basis of a suspicion, given all that, however, that our professional person who is professionally required to make these statements has given us assurance that there would be no change otherwise in terms of figures, from what I can understand. I would take that very seriously as well. I think we would all have to reflect upon whether we want to see the Isle of Wight named on the basis of that line of argument by the government as one of those which had failed to meet the backstop. It is not something I feel like I could take myself. I believe I will go with those things. I'm grateful to Councillor Jarman for raising those issues and identifying a figure which we are assured otherwise, though regrettable, is not a material sum of money in terms of the accounting side of things. For that reason, when we move to the vote, I believe we should take a recorded vote on this matter. So, colleagues, I don't know if I need to get a majority of the committee or first agreeing to a recorded vote. I position before, so otherwise we'll take a recorded vote on that. So, do you wish to speak first, Councillor?
If I could, yeah, I would agree with you. I'm happy to support that if you'd like to, but I'm happy to support that we sign off these accounts with those, we've had those queries, we've raised those. I don't think they are significant enough to not go forward with it. And obviously, if Councillor Jarman wants to take up any issues and double check those at a later date, but I don't feel that there's anything that we should hold back. And with that reputational damage that could happen from it, I think I trust the team that put this together, and I think we should go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So to be absolutely certain, I wonder if our clerk has captured exactly what the first recommendation would now how it would now read. Make sure we've got everything so that we capture precisely the correction that it's been made. So so it would go that the 2022-23 statement of accounts be approved subject to the correction of a figure at, and then page 116 of the figure I don't recall it, 125084 to 125082, comma, and the person presiding be authorised to sign and date the 2022-23 statement of accounts. Second recommendation being that which is printed on the papers. Councillor Redrup.
Sorry to be awkward. Would it be prudent to listen to Councillor Jarman's other issues? Is there too onerous to listen to it now in order that we've got a clearer picture going forward before we take the vote? Would that be acceptable? I know we're all looking at the floor.
I'm always in the hands of the committee. If you believe that would provide you with greater comfort, Councillor Redrup,
yes,
then and if Councillor Jarman wishes to take forward those other concerns, if he believes they would have the effect otherwise of causing us to not make the decision we're being asked to make today.
I'm quite happy to do that, Chair. It depends on how long you want to spend. I did agree earlier that what I would do is give all my marked up copy of agenda item 7 to the finance team so that they could review each of those, because as with that item, I can't definitively say which is a right or wrong answer when I don't have the information to make that determination. I can only point out an anomaly. I can't resolve the anomaly today, and I doubt whether discussion between us across the committee would resolve it either. I think that would simply take up a lot of time to identify more unresolved issues. I don't think the the expectations on the tidal energy system would be today. I know the planning permission has been refused. I think that's quite material. In itself, okay, it's only £1 million, but still £1 million. For most people, that's quite a sum of money. I also would like to go back and look at the recording of the last meeting where we have the determination from the external auditors about the school debt issue. I'm very confident about what I said. I did review it only a week ago. It has not been included. I believe that's a material deficit in here. Whether that needs to be accrued for or not will be a discussion. And again, for the third time, to point out, had any of my invitations to meet with finance been accepted over the last 2 months, these matters could have been resolved in advance of the committee. And it's through the fact that those requests for discussion have not been answered in any way as emails that we are at this point. So I feel we're being put in a very difficult position simply on a reputational issue to make a decision accepting one point, knowing that there may well be others and not knowing how those will be determined or the scope of those other issues. I think it's unfortunate that we're at this stage and the paper's been brought forward to us so late in the day, effectively trying to tie our hands into an impossible situation. It's also unfortunate the cabinet member for finance has departed, but there we are. So I'm not in a position to have confidence in how the examination of those future elements will be resolved. And I don't have the information available to me today to be able to say which way those items will be resolved, only to point out an anomaly.
By anomaly, Councillor Jarman, do you mean that you believe there are other figures that have been misstated accounts?
I believe there are other material issues which have not been accounted for in the accounts, or where there are contingent liabilities which are not dealt with, or where there are investment figures which are quoted, which cannot be substantiated. Now, those would require discussions with finance and probably with internal audit as well, to look at them. But where I cannot ascertain the veracity of information, I cannot support the accounts which use that information. That's not an unusual thing, and I suspect any director of any company would do exactly the same.
Councillor Quirk?
My opinion is that the accounts will be pretty accurate and there's an issue of materiality. But I think we'd have to accept there are some issues that have not been addressed that are contained within the documentation here. If we can find, I don't want to vote this down, but I find it hard to support it as it stands. I think we need to be making some sort of commitment that the issues that have been raised will be properly assessed by the accounting team and appropriate references made if necessary. I think we need to find a slightly different set of words if we're going to be able to approve this.
Is there some means by which we would do that? I have in mind that the second recommendation provides a different route for the next set of accounts. Is there a way of bringing into our proposed recommendation? I'm open to that, to allow for us to proceed as the recommendation would aim to have us proceed, but at the same time still satisfy what Councillor Jarman discussion of points may bring up, and therefore satisfy Councillor Quirk. Is there some means of adding further words after today or whatever were?
We could add in the word similar to the second recommendation there about subject to section 151 officer review of any outstanding issues. And then we have until the end of the week, which is the backstop date is Friday 13th.
And that would be
and
nice.
sign if you and section 151 set up intent.
To basically make sure I come in on Friday and perform my duty of signing something as much as.
Yeah, we'll make appropriate arrangements.
Would that be helpful to committee to basically follow the pattern of the second line of the recommendations? Councillor Jarman, do you think that would help you?
I think if we could have the meeting with finance to go through each of these items and resolve them in advance of Friday, that would be beneficial. The fact that we've been seeking that for 2 months, it's not occurred, is disappointing. And I think the opportunity between now and Friday is limited. We do have quite substantial other items and other committee items before the council this week, not including corporate scrutiny tomorrow and I suspect what will be somewhat contentious cabinet meeting on Thursday. And so the hope of doing that before Friday is limited. The question would be, when we go through those points, will the answers be obtainable by Friday? And then the question, of course, will be, what if there is not closure on those items before Friday? And what condition would we put on that? And again, I wouldn't feel comfortable simply leaving that to the determination of the 151 officer. I think this is a determination of this committee, of the members of the committee and of yourself as chair of it, not something we can easily delegate to the 151 officer in our absence. I'll leave that for your thought, Chair.
Well, you know my feeling, Councillor Jarman, is that I believe I've received sufficient assurance from officers that the accounts will be correct. They're not materially incorrect, but they are mathematically incorrect. I understand the wording. Personally, I think I would go with the vote today to ensure that we can meet the deadline of this Friday. I don't think that stops anything from being explored by any member of this council, and then that being brought back before this committee as a report if necessary. But I rely on the professional opinion of our Assistant Director of Finance that is how things would be. And I do believe that embarrassing this council on the basis of things that would be resolved in any case, but not have an impact on the actual statement of accounts, it is a great risk, and one that one should own that decision. But Councillor Quirk.
Can we get a commitment in resolution? But can we get a commitment in the resolution to add notes to the accounts if Councillor Jarman provides his document to the accounts team, if there are any issues that appear to be material, that we don't change the accounts, we approve the accounts as they are, but we add a note to the accounts that indicates that there are possible unresolved issues. And that would mean that we can actually approve the accounts for the deadline, but actually address the concerns of Councillor Jarman.
Possible to write words into that? I know we could do that by noting through our recommendations. We could add a third recommendation that we note and await explanation.
Question you asked.
Is this a point for the committee, Councillor Redruff, or a side discussion?
Been asked a direct question regarding as a managing director of my own company and other companies, in this situation, what I would do. I agree with the officers that we can correct it in the following set of accounts. I can recall a situation that happened in the past. Personally, I'm trying to judge the level of concern that Councillor Jarman's brought forward to the committee, which is making me uncomfortable. As it's been noted, it's not my money, it's the public's money is what's concerning me here. And I'm finding it difficult to make a decision going forward. But on balance, I'd probably go and agree the accounts, because I know can adjust in the following year if there's anything significant That's
Oh,
my opinion.
Councillor Redrup, Chief Executive, the comments.
Thank you, Chair. I think, it is an important decision for this committee to make in terms of the 22-23 accounts. Having heard your debate this morning, it's very clear that your finance officers are recommending that the accounts subject to that error, which has been picked up on page 116, can be signed off. The second element of your recommendation provides for delegated authority. I think the issues that Councillor Jarman has raised are rightly not necessarily ones that would adjust the figures in 22-23, but they do need to be raised and answers provided as to how they impact 23-24 and 24-25. So my suggestion would be that you amend the first part of your recommendation to include your reference to page 116, that you have your second recommendation, but that you have a third recommendation along the lines of the additional issues raised, which are not necessarily directly related to or will result in an adjustment for 22-23, be considered in full in implementing the second recommendation you've got and in the work in the 24-25 accounts. Oh, there's too many years.
I think that would be helpful, and I would move that from the chair because it would need to be moved by a member. One thing I do have in mind, were such issues to arise that collectively amongst the committee, and particularly Councillor Jarman, that although our next meeting is in March, and I know democratic services don't necessarily like this sort of thing, but it may be sensible for us to consider bringing forward that meeting or having an additional meeting so that we go for formal committees approach on that. Do I hear any reason why we shouldn't try to do that if issues of sufficient import come up? I think that's the time we would go to either March becomes February, or we have a special meeting, probably a special meeting to deal with the next set of accounts. But we retain that, I hesitate to use the word, but backstop of a delegated authority if informally we're collectively not feel comfortable. How do colleagues, would you be happy with that? With reservation, I understand with reservation. That we have a third recommendation along the lines of that the Chief Executive has set out. And I also give my assurance that I would call a special meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee if there were any suggestion that we needed to deal with that properly through committee, rather than leaving it as a delegated authority to two people, to the Section 151 officer and myself as chair. Councillor Jarman.
There is a suggestion that we provisionally agree the accounts subject to the issues being resolved by Friday. And if they're not resolved by Friday, then we would have an extraordinary meeting to discuss the matter again.
That's no, what I was saying, the extraordinary meeting would be to follow through on what Councillor Redrup was saying, that what the Chief Executive picked up, that we could deal with this through the next round of accounts.
As corrections to the previous year accounts.
That's what I believe set out. I'm misunderstanding things. We've gone round and round this quite a lot.
I think the implication would be that if there are any matters which come to light as a result of looking at the issues Councillor Jarman has raised, sorry. Okay, I think I'm okay now. Then the impact on the 23-24 accounts would result in the opening balances being adjusted for that year, which essentially is the closing balances from 22-23. So we can pick up those issues there. The issues that I've heard today, obviously I don't know what else Councillor Jarman would like us to look at. As I said, wouldn't actually result in any adjustments to the accounts other than that typographical error in that table on page 116. If there are issues that do come to light that do require us to make a change, then they can be reflected in the 23-24 closing balances from previous year. Opening balance.
Colleagues, I'm adding in that third recommendation. Councillor Critchison was my seconder on that. Are you prepared to also second on that? Councillor Churchman, I think we will need now to move to a vote. I've been trying to find something that brings comfort to all of us, albeit with some reservations. Councillor Churchman.
I just wonder what the auditors think about not just the discussions, but about the recommendation, please. I would like a view.
If Mr. Souter is still there, if he feels he is in a position to comment, that would be helpful.
So your recommendation, as I understand, is to approve those accounts today, 22-23, subject to the typographical error, which is immaterial. I think your officers have, given you assurance that the other issues raised are not material to those accounts, and it's germane to remember that you're not approving these accounts as exact to the penny. You are recommending them or approving them as materially correct. So if the officers are giving you that assurance, I would, I think the recommendations you have in place to approve those are probably sufficient with picking up items through to the next committee. But you can't put a caveat on, we'll approve 22-23 and we'll think about it down the line. It's more of a yes or no. I'm not sure this is going to help. You have to be clear, if you're not going to approve the account, why you're not approving, what you would need, and how the issue would be resolved. Which goes back to the earlier questions about, it's not a sort of sorry, I can't remember how it was phrased, but it's not sort of suspicions. It's detailed position. I'm happy that your proposed recommendations are sufficient for audit purposes to meet your requirements. It will enable me to sign, and I think you have a reasonable way through of exploring any issues that do arise in terms of your next 23-24 accounts. I hope that was reasonable. Just trying to work through the issues on the spot here.
I think that's helpful. Councillor Churchman, have you found that helpful? That I believe Mr. Souter's words give you some comfort if you were to vote for these recommendations today.
Well, life is a compromise, and we could sit here all day talking about this. I suppose at the end of the day, after all four of us are going to be here at the next meeting, 5, 6 of us. So this is not going to go away. So I think what he said is reasonable. Thank you, Chair.
I certainly think that's very helpful, Mr. Souter, just to add that additional comfort. We've had that from officers as well. That's not to discount in any way the concerns that Councillor Jarman has, and as I think I opened my remarks, that he will have looked at these forensically, and that's a great asset to the committee that we have somebody who is capable of doing that, both in terms of time and expertise. But I think we've heard enough. Personally, I feel we have sufficient comfort to approve the recommendations as set, as I have moved and Councillor Critchison has seconded. Certainly, I want my vote recorded as being for that recommendation. I think it's very important given the nature of things. But okay, you have the recommendations before you. We'll still take it by hand. I'll just take. If you personally want your vote recorded, I think we'll do it that way. But those in favour of the recommendations as set out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with mine recorded, most definitely 4. Those against the recommendation? John? Do you wish your vote recorded in that respect, Councillor Jarman? I missed whether you said yes or no. That vote passes. Thank you, colleagues. It has taken us a lot of time. I hope you form with me, trying to steer us to a point where I think we've got something that maintains the reputation of the council, has allowed for some significant questions to be raised. I thank everybody who's contributed to that. We can now return to item 6 and the Chief Internal Auditor to give us some important but perhaps slightly lighter lines of questioning.
Thank you, Chair. And in actual fact, for clarity, I would have been on the same page as well, where you can make adjustments at a later stage. But I think we're done and dusted. In relation to the progress report that you have in front of you, we obviously need to convey whether we are on track to complete the work. We are on track to complete. We have 3 areas where there are high risks within them. However, their overall rating is given as reasonable. And we have 1 area which is planned maintenance, where we are giving limited assurance. Follow-up work has been performed throughout the year, and a number of grants have influenced movement within the plan, which again are included within. Beyond that, Chair, in relation to the progress report, I wasn't going to cover anything else. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the briefings I get as chair from yourself and from Mr. Newton beforehand on this. I do know there are some questions having been prefigured. I think Councillor Quirk, you had some questions on this, which is item 6. I think page 74 was the
Page 74, the Woodland Primary School, it was removed because they didn't have the resources to be audited, and that raises a few questions as to they probably need auditing more if they can't have the resources to be audited. So just a comment on that.
Councillor Quirk, thank you. There is a sensitive background to this. There is a key individual that whenever we go out on site is fundamental that we engage with because of their role. That individual, unfortunately, has been out on long-term sick. They had requested that potentially that we move the audit to the 4th quarter. I think because of the circumstances of their absence, it is actually better that we defer till Q1. So I understand your concern for you raising, and obviously the activities within the school. It is predominantly because we would have added additional pressure on that individual that hasn't long returned, that I made the judgment that actually that wouldn't be fair or appropriate and that we would move it.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Councillor John.
Sorry, on the recording, I'll just say again. So the question was about the Altar system, where you've noted there are 100 or perhaps more officers that would able to access the data and actually to have editing rights to that data.
We're pleased to report that that issue has now been addressed. Basically, what we're talking about are files which are extracted from one system, sit in a temporary location before they're imported into another system, and the access was at the temporary file locations, and that access has now been reviewed and has now been brought in line with what is required for the people who are actually carrying out those transfers between the 2 systems.
Are you happy for me to continue, Chair?
Of course, of course.
So
if I nod at you, that's fine.
And did that include data that would normally be covered by GDPR, i.e. personal information?
Potentially it did, yes.
Can I just add, though, it's not to say that those officers would have accessed, that they would have had the ability.
Yeah, so I understand that. It's just something I need to take away to another committee, which we've mentioned already. I think
Sorry, just a quick comment, Councillor Jarman. The data was fairly anonymised, and it was literally just all there was a reference number and an amount. So it would be very difficult to actually identify the individual's information.
Thank you. The next question I had was following on a similar vein to what Councillor Quirk had noted, that there were, as well as the one he picked up, there are others which are noted as suspended. And some of those jumped out at me a little bit more than others. The one about the ICB in particular on page 73, regarding the audit on provider failure. I wonder if you could elaborate on where we are with that, please. Obviously, anything to do with health that involves the word provider failure gets people quite interested.
Councillor, we're duty bound that any of the audit activities need to align to the risk exposure within the organisation, but obviously we're a finite resource. Grants that come on the table that require a sign off, we don't have any ability not to cover them, and we have to cover them. There are regular conversations with all of the directors regarding the risk exposures within their area. So any work that gets taken out of the plan, basically for reconsideration for future audit plans, are discussed with the relevant directors, although it may have been myself that would have considered taking them out to begin with. The provider failure audit area that in actual fact has come into the plan is because following conversations with the director, who actually happens to be here, there was an emerging risk that we wanted to understand better, which is why there has been some amendments. So that is added in because we want to get some assurances. The others would be taken out because they are considered potentially of less risk than those that we've included in at that given time.
Yeah, I'll bring the director in here as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the adult social care audits as they appear on page 73, I just stress the Better Care Fund audit is the one that's linked to the Integrated Care Board. That has been suspended due to national changes in relation to the way in which the governance of that national scheme works. The government, when they came into authority, paused any review and amendment of the Better Care Fund for 2025-26. It's likely that there will be a rollover arrangement with a full rejigging of the Better Care Fund arrangements from 26 onwards. We're awaiting further clarity in relation to that, and to audit against what we had for this financial year wouldn't stand us in better stead moving forward. So we've asked for that to be suspended. In its place, in consultation with our audit colleagues, I asked for 2 additional audits to be included in relation to my service area. The first around provider failure, the second around occupational therapy. Dealing with the first, occupational therapy is a relatively new function for the local authority, having only transferred in this time last year. We think we've got a handle on it. The opportunity to have a critical friend in that space to provide us with a level of assurance that we're managing our duties effectively in that area is too good an opportunity for me to miss. In relation to provider failure, it's linked to the local authority's policies around market sustainability, one of our duties under the Care Act and the legislation within which we operate. We do have a provider failure protocol. It's been in place since I drafted it 6 years ago. It's recognised nationally as good, in fact, best practice, and has been adopted by the Association of Directors of Adult Social Care nationally for the last 5 years. We haven't reviewed it, and given the fragility of the marketplace linked to funding and linked to the pressures we've seen post-COVID around the delivery of adult social care, it feels opportune to undertake that review in partnership with our audit colleagues to ensure that we're still delivering the right level of service to people in our community, and that our policies and procedures continue to do what we need them to do in those extreme periods of pressure for adult social care here on the Isle of Wight. Chairman, I hope that's of assistance.
I hope so. Councillor Jarman will comment.
Yes, thank you for the full answer. Very beneficial indeed. It just shows how valuable it is to have officers here at meetings that we can deal with these things real time. The other one, although there were quite a number that were suspended, the other one that jumped at me a little bit was relating to the Ministry of Justice land, which is on page 75.
The rationale, to be honest, for suspending that at present and reconsidering for Q1 of next year is the fact that there has been delays within the project. And whenever we do an audit, we need to consider whether there is anything substantively delayed, or whether there's anything going on that may influence what it is that we're looking at and mean that we are only looking at a reduced scope, which, to be honest, for us to come back and revisit is probably not necessarily efficient. So that at present is moved out of this year's plan, but it's to be reconsidered for 25, 26 and Q1.
And the third item was from page 83 and 84, I believe, which is about the maintenance arrangements that we have in place. And I'm sure this comes over into the funding of those. There were a couple of things there that got my attention. One was the fact that we didn't have a strategic plan for actually managing any of the property portfolio, which was subject to obvious, deterioration over time. The second thing was on the following page, which related specifically to asbestos issues. And the word asbestos always gets my interest anyway on these types of matters where we're dealing with those. And then it goes all the way through, I think, to the page 85 itself, in terms of what is the plan to sort out both our strategy, the asbestos issue, and the software component. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will probably ask the director, who I think acquired this service a number of months ago, but you'll be able to confirm. Obviously, the implementation action dates are contained within the report. We are concerned regarding the asbestos, but it is linked to leaseholder and leaseholder arrangements. But I'll hand over to Sharon Betts to give you the actions.
Thank you. So it is a very, very small team, but since the audit, we have done an analysis of property maintenance, and you'll be pleased to hear that we've looked at all the properties and put together a much more detailed capital programme, which will be part of the budget setting process for 25-26. So we're hopeful there that the monies that we will be receiving through the capital programme will be more reflective of the maintenance that needs to be undertaken. You'll see from the report that previously the process was very reliant on property liaison officers feeding back into the property management team whether there are any issues with the properties, but we've formalised the process a lot more, so we're getting more information back from the PLOs, property liaison officers, and undertaking some surveys of the properties to make sure that we're looking after our properties and maintaining them in a better way. With regard to the asbestos surveys, I'm pleased to say that we have a new person starting with us from the 1st of January who has experience of estates management, and guess what? This will be their first task to liaise with tenants and lessees to understand and make sure that they're aware of their responsibilities under their lease or their tenancy. So that will be work that will be ongoing. With the third item on Technology Forge, don't know how quite it happened, but last year as part of the financial requirements, a capital bid was made for the replacement of Technology Forge, which was to enable the migration of data. But unfortunately, as we are aware now, majority of these new software packages are cloud-based and therefore are revenue-driven. But for whatever reason, there was no aligned revenue bid made. So we found ourselves in a position where we had a capital bid, but no monies for any software going forward. So we've rectified that within this, in the budget setting cycle going forward, to make sure we mitigate any risk of losing the data, because Technology Forge is no longer maintained. We've worked very closely with our organisational development team, who've been brilliant in drawing out to the key data. So we've got that in a very safe place. And we've also taken on an admin assistant who is working through that data to make sure it's more accurate. So when we get into a position of migrating the data in April, hopefully, fingers crossed, we get the budget agreed, we'll be in a position then to migrate accurate data. So hopefully that provides you with some reassurance they're actually working towards these action points.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jarman, do you have any further points? I should note that the Chief Executive did let me know beforehand that she would need to leave at 12 o'clock. She has a meeting relating to the wider issues of the region in terms of devolution over in Southampton. So a Chief Exec's meeting and leaders. So it was one that I felt was sufficiently important that she should indeed, of course, leave us at that time. So colleagues, any other questions on the Chief Internal's Auditor's report? If not, then we I haven't got my recommendation in front of me. Well, we note your report. Yes, we do just note your report. So thank you for that. And then the next one is the fraud, irregularity and whistleblowing annual report.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy that I present my report? The report that you have in front of you obviously is the annual fraud investigation whistleblowing that we need to make you aware of. Obviously, it's within the boundaries of certain information can't be shared with you until we've gone through the various time restrictions. So if, for example, there was a prosecution, we wouldn't be able to share, and it's equally, we wouldn't share the nitty-gritty finer detail if there has been staff involved. In relation to the report that you have in front of you, it gives you the framework that there is a degree of assurance that you can be provided with, and it tells you the level of activity that we have carried out for the year 23-24. Beyond that, Chair, I am more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. And again, sorry for the confusion that's there. Somebody appeared on the screen and I thought they were going to be declaiming to us on some matter. But questions on this report, colleagues? I thought it was pretty clear and direct. So otherwise, I think we can do as the recommendation requires, which is that we note that report. And thank you. In which case we can move to item 8, which is Procurement Half-Yearly Report, page 281. That is the officer that we appeared briefly and caused me some confusion. I'll pass over to you, Mr. Sandercott.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Apologies coming in not quite on cue. Apologies for that. Thank you, Chair. This report provided in front of members is to provide a a headline look at procurement and contract activity during the last 6 months from April of 2024 through to September. The recommendation is for noting. It provides both a brief update around the work and activities that the council's been carrying out, also around the procurement legislation and preparedness, and actions carried out also in regards to the existing procurement strategy and its final period as well. So I would add that any specific questions on projects may need to be deferred and referred back to committee, as it would be likely that individual officers who have been involved on those individual procurement projects or contracts may not be on this call, but I'm happy to take any questions as they arise on those points. And key points within the report I would just highlight to members are that on item 11.12 in the report, table 1A provides a summary of the contracts awarded in the last 6 months. The numbers are broadly in line with those previous numbers, but overall value is slightly lower than that, and that's probably due to individual nature of the previous procurements. The waivers section, and that's table 3, will show a difference. That's mainly through now changes in terms of internal processes, that any placements, children's placements or step down arrangements now are no longer requiring waivers to be approved. Those are now part of a separate approval process that is already in place. So what we're trying to do is sort of remove internal bureaucracy, if you like, from ways of working. And what we're now doing is recording and reporting those separately and highlighting those separately in the report. So that's tables 4A and 4B will include children's placements and step down arrangements on this report and future reports going forward. They were previously logged as waivers, and like I said, will now be taken out of that part of the report. And then the procurement strategy and the details around that appendix 3 provides an update on actions against the strategy itself, and puts forward a number of tasks that are now considered to be completed, and any other tasks which are overdue or not started are being considered as part of the continued activity work for the preparation of the new procurement legislation that comes into place from February 2025. So at that point, Chair, I would pause, happy to take any questions from around the room.
Colleagues, questions on this report? It looks again as though there aren't any questions on this. In terms of delivering, I think it was appendix 3. I think there are a couple of points, but I think I can take those up directly with you, Mr. Sandercock.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
So, colleagues, otherwise, may we? Oh, Councillor Churchman.
I'm not quite sure. Recently, the Times reported that there was an inquiry into pension funds investing in children's care, etc., and talking about how it has raised the cost for all councils across the country. I'm not quite sure what I'm trying to get at, but do you see something being done about this, and that the investment funds that invest in these projects, which have pushed up enormously the price of children in care, do you see anything happening as regard to that?
Sorry, Councillor, what would be helpful if I could have the details from you separately. I think I probably would look to defer that question to Director of Adults in particular on that point. But like I said, if there was any specific details, happy to take that offline, and then we can then provide a substantive response if possible.
If you're okay, the director has had to leave, of course. So, but but if you do that and anything that needs reporting back to this committee, we will take that.
Yes.
Otherwise, colleagues, are you content to note this report? I'll take that as your contentment and move us on then to
Thank you, Chair.
item 9. Thank you for Steve for your contribution this morning.
Thank you.
Item 9 is the Treasury Managed Report Q2.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. This is our regular quarterly update for the Treasury Management performance. We're now looking at Q2 for 24-25. So this takes us to the end of September. The report on the appendix has been prepared based on the template that's been provided to us by Close, our investment providers. So it will be laid out in a similar format to previous ones. So you should be familiar with it by now. Just a couple of little bits I'm just going to highlight. During this half year, as you can see on table 2, which is on page 328, we've actually managed to repay 4.4 million of PWLB borrowing. This is 1.5 million of that was a historic loan, which has been repaid in full because it came to maturity. But the balance of that 2.9 million is where we have made instalment payments of the principal, because we have our later borrowings have been done on the basis that we repay it equally in instalments. Every 6 months we pay a chunk back, so therefore reducing the interest charge as the loan matures. There's also been a reduction in short-term borrowing by 7 million. The only thing I will say is that there is a chance that the short-term borrowing will have to increase again, or some borrowing will be required by year end. Whether we go short-term or long-term, I think it depends on the interest rates, which at the moment are reasonably high on the local to local market, with a view to by the end of March, I expect them going up into the stratosphere again, a bit like they did last year, because there's a lack of cash out there. Most local authorities don't have a huge amount of cash, as you can understand, and everyone's trying to reduce their borrowing costs as much as they can, so there's not a lot of surplus. Since this report was written, the Bank of England has again reduced the base rate for interest down to 4.75 from 5%. This doesn't actually have a huge amount of effect on the cost of borrowing to us, because the bulk of our borrowing is long-term, so it is fixed. What it does mean is that any short-term borrowing starts at a lower rate, let's put it that way. Any high levels that we have to pay are based purely on market purposes rather than the base rate. Close is still forecasting that the rate should drop down to about 3.75% by about December next year. So we'll just have to see if they continue with that thought process. During the 6 months, Treasury Management managed to contribute to council performance to the tune of about 2.1 million. This is basically where we have received additional interest on our money market investments, which is due to the higher rate. So we've won on that score, and the lower charges we have incurred on borrowing, primarily because of the historic balances that we've got and the rates they're at. So that's we're still managing to contribute a bit towards the performance of the council. And then finally, just to say that throughout 6 months, both the prudential and Treasury indicators have all been complied with. That's all I wanted to say on the report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. It's always good to hear from you the contribution that this work is making to the council's finances. Colleagues, any questions? Councillor Jarman.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to ask that the committee give their profound thanks to Jo. And she's smiling broadly here, which is always nice to see, because we don't often see it from Jo, but she deals with lots of difficult issues. And she has been an enormous value and asset to this committee and to the council, and is to be commended on that. And we wish her very well in her future moves.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
I think the whole committee would echo that. You beat me to that. I was going to do that at the end of your normal questions, Councillor Chapman, but absolutely, you managed to make what is potentially a very complex, what is a very complex area easy to understand and easy to have assurance that the work is being done properly and efficiently. So, but indeed, personally, my best wishes to you. It's been a pleasure, and the whole committee as well. Colleagues, any questions upon Ms. Cook's report?
May I just add second Councillor Jarman's comments? And when our pensions, our fund manager left, I know you were under enormous pressure and you worked extremely hard. So from behalf of the council, thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody. It's much appreciated.
Any questions just to give you the final flavour of this committee? No, I think you're getting away without having to face questions from us. So we will, of course, note your report and informally, because we can't make a recommendation, but wish you very well for the future as well. So, which brings us to item 10, the council's risk profile. Ms. Downall.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, obviously, this is a regular risk profile that the committee sees each time. As usual, the mitigations within the risks have been updated by those that are responsible for the individual requirements within it. That in turn has been reviewed on 2 occasions at the corporate management team by the chief exec and the directors who attend that board. This time round, there are no significant changes and there are no new risks been added to the profile and within the period. The one change that you may notice is that the changes now are in bold, not italics, and that has been done on purpose as it's easier to read for those who may otherwise have difficulties. We're going through a review with the Director of Adults in the next month to have a look at some of the issues that she raised earlier. So that profile will be updated along with 1 or 2 others for the next meeting in March. Happy to take any questions should there be any.
Thank you, reporter. And indeed, it is easier to read in bold rather than italics. I did note that there's a huge number of pressures on the council at the moment, both financial and human resource related. So committee, of course, is looking to make sure that we are asked to approve this as something that the CMT and others are working with to manage all of the risks that these pressures and others bring to us. But Councillor Churchman, I think I saw your hand.
It's possibly slightly outside your remit. However, the ferries at the moment are causing the most enormous problem. And what concerns myself, and I'm sure the rest of us, is the actual link. I have no idea how, but somehow can this be raised and put on the risk register? Because we really are at risk now. We've got virtually 1 ferry running when they feel like it. Red Funnel seem to be out of the picture. And I just think we need to advertise and really start shouting at government, whoever. We are at enormous risk. It's going to send up the cost of suppliers coming to the island. It's going to affect our tourist industry, which is, after all, our main source of revenue. So I'm just posing a question, how, where, just what do we do about this? Can you, in your capacity, help in any way? Thank you. Oh, by the way, what do Audit think about it? Thank you.
Okay, you may recall at a previous audit meeting that we had the ferries in particular on for, I can't actually recall the incident, but there was another similar type scenario. Everything that the council has control
of has been put in place. It was on for a couple of reports. Because that's all the mitigations are in place, it was taken off this one. It might be better if I put it back on next time so you can see the evidence of what the council is doing where it has that authority. I will, I know, sorry, I was looking for a director. The director of community services does attend a specific transport group of which the ferries are party to. So I know that is something that's in place and ongoing. But if it's helpful, I will, for the next report, put those mitigations back in so that you can see them and see what's happening at all. But they are in hand and addressed, which is why they were taken off.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other points on the risk register? I think the one that you have made, Councillor Churchman, is an extremely important one, the way we can respond to things which are outside of our, particularly outside of our control in that respect, but have such a big impact on us. And I'm minded of this kind of things that are covered under the business continuity plan side of things as much as anything. But the Chief Internal Auditor will comment because you invited her.
Councillor Churchman, in answer to your question, what do Audit think? We would be looking to see whether as an organisation, irrespective of whether it's to a degree a risk that you can duly influence or not, is about having the visibility, having the discussion at a senior level, having all of the considerations, and then where there are multiple agencies that can potentially influence, it's about whether you're having those discussions. So I think what the council duly does, which is at a senior management team level, where there are potential risks that are emerging, is they will get together, they'll get together obviously with other parties in relation to something like the ferries. That should be included if it gets to a level where you think that that is causing or potentially could cause you significant disruption, impact and everything else. That clearly though is within the boundaries of what's your mitigation, because what can you not influence?
Thank you. In bold, I see we've had additions under the business continuity plan side of things, which refers to adverse weather events, where obviously the weather is outside of our control, but its impact is controllable. And some of what we're seeing very, very recently, of course, affecting the ferries is a response, is the adverse weather events. We do get cut off, and of course, 4 years ago, although memories dim of that year and the impact of COVID, we saw significant changes in way everything was operated in order to respond, including the ferry operation itself. So it's a very, very important issue. Any other comments, questions on this, or do we feel that we can, with those in mind, approve this the usual way? I'll move that therefore from the chair. Those in favour of approving, please show. And no one is against. Didn't see any against. I did slightly look away. So no, nobody's correcting me on that. So thank you very much for that. As you know, I've paid a lot of attention to that over time. So we look forward to seeing it the next time around. Okay. Excuse me, my voice is slightly going for some reason. We're now on to item 11. I'm aware we've got half an hour of our usual time period available. We can always extend if need be, but only one major item to get through, which is the review of the Constitution. So we have two things there. First, the Future Governance Update Report. Claire Shand is joining us up on the screen there. Can I just record in this forum my thanks to all the officers who are working incredibly hard. And I know Councillors Jarman, Quirk and Churchman, Councillor Richardson, you've all been very much involved in the informal side of things and seen that. I've seen that from the project board side of things, that working very hard to deliver this. a lot of it is at the moment behind the scenes, but I was reminded that a couple of meetings ago, we did look at the high level plan in formal committee side of things. Members of the council, of course, will now start to see some of that really being come to the fore for them, not just the fact that they will be asked to approve a draft constitution, but they've been asked about training. I think that email has now gone out about training, but also other matters around the staff forums and discussions, the communications, the whole works for us to be ready for the committee system. I'll stop there and ask Claire Shan to comment on this report.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. I think in essence, you've probably said all that needs to be said in that regard, Chair. But just suffice it to say that we have continued to make good progress on the project and indeed against the project plans and anticipated timeline. Work has very much focused on developing a draft of the new constitution provisions, and I think it's fair to say that with the committee's support, we're very much in a position now where we can make a recommendation that, although still a working draft and still work to be done, we are hopeful that we have put in place the fundamentals of the new constitution provisions, hence the recommendations contained within the report today that will allow us to get to a point of much wider council input to those documents, and hopefully help us get towards a position where we have that final draft ready for the annual council in May. There is a recommendation also in today's paper alongside that we're asking for delegated authority to be given to the monitoring officer, obviously in conjunction with committee members, just to make any final revisions once your considerations have been concluded on the work that's been done thus far. Obviously happy to answer any questions that anybody may have, and I'm in your hands.
Thank you for that. For those who've not seen the draft constitution, this is what it looks like. If you decide, I will say I printed it out on my own printer, not on council paper and with council ink, so that comes out my allowance. It is a substantive document so far. It needs to be a substantive document as well. I'm marking up my paper copy, but Councillor Jarman made an excellent suggestion, which has now been implemented, that we can amend the document in real time with our own suggestions for the monitoring officer. So we go on to a file. Have you yet used that, Councillor Jarman?
Yes. So the documents are all on SharePoint. And I think I've gone through all the documents twice now, and all of my comments are on there. There are two types of comments, one of which are changes to the text of the document, which need to be reviewed at some stage fairly soon and either accepted or not accepted. And indeed, whoever's the editing controller of the document can right-click and accept or not as we go through it. The other one are some observations which are included in square brackets in there. Some people attach them as notes or call-outs. Different people use different terminology. And when you go through it online, as I'm sure you will on SharePoint, Chair, some stage, as everybody else will, you'll see the comments are highlighted by the initials of the people and color-coded accordingly to whoever's made them. I cannot, having gone through it again last night, not for long, only 2 or 3 hours, I could not see any point of contention where one member had suggested an alternative to another yet. Possibility that some may be added. But I think we're homing in on a final version, which is excellent.
Certainly, I will be doing so. I find it easier to mark up a paper copy and then translate that into electronic format. I would remind members, of course, that Council itself in January would be an opportunity to bring forward any final amendments. And of course, it is a document that is as I understand, the theory of this would be formally adopted under the new system at the AGM in May. So there are still opportunities to formally amend it, but the more we can do informally, the better. I know that Councillor Brodie, he's reassured me that he's going to be going through it as well. Obviously, he's very keen interest in the whole project to deliver a committee system, as we all know, but is also a keen student of constitutions generally, and in particular will be of this new one. So, if people find that they don't have much to do after Boxing Day, and the weather is a little adverse, then I do recommend they take an opportunity, even if you are not restanding next year, or you are not returned. It will be a document that 39 people have to abide by in terms of their role as members of the council, and then the document that our staff will be delivering against as well. So it's vital we get it as right as possible. It's good to hear, though, that no contention really is occurring. I'll try not to be contentious myself. Councillor Quirk, I think you had your hand.
I apologise that I haven't done my bits and pieces online. My current disability here so limited me a bit there. Two areas of concern. One, some of the things in planning, reserved matters in planning has a different meaning than reserved matters in the book, so in the Constitution. So I think we need to just clarify some of those. And I've got a concern around the delegated authority to officers. Delegates lots of authority, but actually it needs to be tighter in terms of that exercising that authority within the terms of the policy and strategies of the council and within budget. Thank you for that. And I'm sure that'll be fed through to Mr. Potter, but do feed it through directly if you can. And I'm sure Clash Hand will also pick up on that. Colleagues, any other points on where we are at? I would highlight there will also be a members briefing ahead of January's full council. That still is in planning, isn't it, Claire?
Yes, yes, it is.
So that we can pick up anything else that those last. I'm sure all 39 of us are deeply interested in the Constitution, but our capacity isn't necessarily the same across all 39 of us to actually engage with it. So. Otherwise, I'll move the recommendations which are printed there. Oh, Councillor Jarman, you wanted to. Oh, I haven't finished my sentence. Brilliant. Yes, moving those recommendations as seconded by Councillor Jarman. Thank you. Those in favour of those recommendations, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you on that.
Thank you, Chair.
And then
thank
there's
you for your kind words.
Well, they're well deserved. They're well deserved to all the staff working on this, making contribution if they're not directly working. So, and then we move on to constitutional provisions, the budget setting side of things. You'll recall that we got some legal advice, and some words were brought before us. And last time around, certainly I wasn't content with those, but for other reasons, a different recommendation was passed. But the serendipity of that report coming forward is it identified two areas particularly where we need to revise our current constitution in terms of standing orders that we have been working under. I hope that it's not contentious to adopt those. It's really important that we not fetter our discretion in any way or do anything even unlawful. So the recommendation there is that item 4. Does anybody wish to comment on? I think it's item 4. Yes, Councillor John. Yeah. Of ourselves. Not the fettering by the one foreign officer of ourselves. We're unfettering ourselves. But it's an important thing, and actually looking through the new constitution, we should have regard to every place where it might look as though the members of the council could potentially be fettered, which we are not. So, but otherwise, it's been moved and seconded that we make those revisions, and on as an onward recommendation to full council, we can't revise the constitution ourselves, but that would be to January ahead of the budget setting process. Those in favour of that, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you again. I know it was a contentious and has been contentious, the whole budget side of things, but there has been some serendipity in terms of getting that legal view on parts of our constitution. So we should note that sometimes contentiousness can lead to a favourable outcome as well. So item 12 is our work plan. Any comments on our work plan through coming months? And item 13, therefore, is members' question time. Any question from members? Councillor Critchison.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question, just about the training again, and I think that has come up through the constitution and ready for the committee system next year, seeing that the training is really important. And I think just to press forward that maybe we need to make sure that all councillors do fill in the training needs. I think the questionnaire that's come out, I have already filled that in, especially with data, which brought me back to the reading through the data for this kind of committee, that it was quite important. So, and if there's any pointers in the meantime, send through to me. Before, I know we're sort of going through a period of change, but still we've got another meeting coming up, so that would be useful. Thank you.
As a question, I agree with you. Yes, the answer is yes to your question. Certainly, training is very important. Otherwise, thank you for your forbearance. Councillor Churchman, you have.
Just talking about training, 39 councillors. I just said to Councillor Jarman, how do we fit in all this training, planning, audit, you name it, and we have training to do. He suggested, could we please, Chief Exec, move some bunk beds into County Hall?
Is there a line item in the budget for that? Because I'm sure that would get scrutinised. But it is difficult, and I do rely on being able to watch back recordings, paper kind of digests or electronic paper digests of the key points and those sorts of things. But collectively, the aim is collectively, as any board of people, is that we have expertise collectively. We don't necessarily all have to have the same level of expertise, but so if you do miss out on some training or whatever, do check out that one of your colleagues has had that training and see that they're using it. But otherwise, if there are no other questions, I will close the meeting and say thank you to all. It has not been the warmest of meetings. We've done some very important business. Thank you for bearing with me as your chair. And I will see you again formally in March, subject to there being a need to have a special committee meeting, as we discussed earlier. Thank you. And wish you well for Christmas and the New Year if I don't see you.